Why hello everybody and welcome back to the Hobbs channel, and today I want to talk to you about a little known movie known as The Martian. The Martian stars Matt Damon, is directed by Ridley Scott, and I want to talk about visual narrative when it comes to this film. What I mean by visual narrative is how editing techniques are used to bring across the story and emotion very effectively in this film and in film in general, but this film is just a great place to start, or rather to study completely, because it just shows so well how the editor, the director and the cinematographer all collaborated to make something amazing. Not only is The Martian such a great place to talk about the visual narrative as a thing, it's also just one of my favorite movies since it came out in 2015 because it has space, it has Matt Damon, it's directed by Ridley Scott, the visual effects are out of this world. It's like you can't even tell where they use visual effects. The way they do the story is not only efficient, it's also emotionally impactful, and that is very linked to the editing. Now, to get into the nitty-gritty of why I chose The Martian, to do this I need to talk about two forms of editing. The first is continuity editing, and the second is complexity editing. Continuity editing, as the name definitely suggests, has to do with, well, the continuity of the film. That's what this type of editing basically tries to keep intact, to make sure the story makes sense, to make sure that we as humans who understand film after it being around for so long now, don't go, that makes no sense, that's inconsistent, blah blah. Continuity editing is all about making sure everything is up to scratch, and if there is a continuity error, that can't be changed to make it less noticeable for the viewers. Continuity editing is all about making the film as flawless as it can be in terms of getting the story across to you. Complexity editing, however, is more about emotion. It's about kind of taking the viewer into this 2D space and making it feel real, so to speak. That's what complexity editing is about. It's about getting the emotion out of the viewer. It's about making the viewer feel like they're in the story, or at the very least watching in the real world it unfold. That's what complexity editing is about. Now, montage falls under complexity editing, but I'll get onto montage soon enough. Now, the reason that I love The Martian so much is because it manages to pull off complexity editing and continuity editing at the exact same time, sometimes in the exact same damn scene, like an amazing rainbow vomit of awesomeness. The way the film achieves this is through montage, and these montages are so awesomely done that it doesn't simply fall under complexity editing. These types of montages, it falls under both, in my opinion. An example of what I'm talking about is when Mark Watney is left for dead, and we as the audience find out that, well, he's not dead. I mean, we pretty much all knew he wasn't going to die, but still, we officially find out he's not dead. And after he's taken the metal out of his chest, that's when he kind of gets into this thing of, I'm not just going to sit here and die, I'm going to figure out what the hell I need to do. And then it goes into this completely just montage of him doing what he needs to do with music behind it. Which is just a really great way of moving the story forward at the same time as giving you this emotional impact, because we've had dialogue literally 10 seconds before of him being determined to do what he needs to do. Then we see him doing it through a montage, but a pretty detailed montage, to be honest, with music behind it. And it really feels like we're watching him do it, not just like hit some electronics and bam, he's done what he needs to do. They take this even further later when you get montages exactly like this, except he's talking behind them. So for example, it will be him in front of the camera, in front of the kind of GoPro web camera, where he's talking about what he's going to do, and when he gets a certain point in there, it cuts to him doing the stuff in the future while it's still him in the present talking about what he's going to do later. So we get him talking about it and doing it at the same time, which is why I would say it's complexity and continuity, because we get such emotional investment from that, yet it's driving the story forward, it's moving the plot forward so efficiently, at the same time as so efficiently getting emotion out of us.
Now, if I remember my training correctly, one of the lessons was titled, "Don't dig up the big box of plutonium, Mark." I get it, RTGs are good for spacecraft, but if they rupture around humans, no more humans. Which is why we buried it when we arrived. And planted that flag so we would never be stupid enough to accidentally go near it again. But, as long as I don't break it.
Now, one thing to note here is montage does not just mean music and some clips behind it that passes time really quickly. That's not all a montage is. It's just The Martian happens to put in those types of montages really effectively, and not in a cliche way at all. It felt so original, yet it was on the beaten path, if that makes sense. Like, they were on the beaten path, but then they painted the beaten path with a paintbrush. Now, that was an analytical montage. There's also idea associative montage, and under these there are 5 subsections of montage. They're going to be on the screen now for you to look at them, Google them, find out what they mean. Yeah, that's right, that's them. Now, the next device that the Martian uses to make the world and the story feel that much more real, to feel that much more lived in, is that there are these sequences where NASA is working on things, or even Mark is working on things, but there's like progress happening, there's stuff being built, and instead of just telling you what happens, or kind of showing someone do one aspect and then cutting to it being done like a lot of films do tend to do, what actually happens is we get like a background of what they're gonna do, and then we get like a time lapse. We get a time lapse of them doing it. There's a great scene where Mark finds the Pathfinder, which is basically this kind of like camera thing that can transmit from Mars to Earth, and they also have a model back on Earth, and they then they talk through hexadecimals, and to make that setup of hexadecimal talking, there's like a time lapse of them all working on it. And it's so cool, like they're actually tinkering and everything and making this thing, whether it's real or not in terms of if they were actually achieving anything with the tinkering. Point is, the editor must have known what he was going to do. The editor must have talked to the cinematographer and the director extensively on that, because otherwise you're not going to shoot like 15 minutes of people tinkering with stuff and then do like a really cool time lapse of it. There would be no other reason for shooting 50 minutes of people just tinkering with stuff. It just feels so much more lived in, because it kind of feels like you're watching a documentary when you're watching them actually kind of like make this thing and work on it. Another great example of that is when they're going to send a probe of food to Mark, and you get a time lapse of the probe being kind of like checked and everything, and it's just so cool because it gives you this idea of like, hey, this is actually being worked on right now. Even though it's not, we get that really powerful illusion of, hey, they're doing all the checkups, they're turning on everything, they're doing all this over this like 4 or 5 hour period, and it's just like, whoa, that's really cool. Most films wouldn't give you this really cool like time lapse of the day. They're like working on the probe. It's just really cool, and it's a really awesome editing technique that drives the story forward. And it also gives you a bit of suspense, to be honest, because you're like, you're waiting to see where this time lapse takes you, as opposed to just cutting from bloop to bloop. Another really great thing about The Martian that had to have been collaborated with the editor on were these wide shots of Mars. We get them in the beginning of the film and throughout. In the beginning of the film, we get this idea of how beautiful Mars is, but also there's lingering kind of danger. In the back of your head, you're kind of like feeling that because of the movie. Then later, after Mark is found to be alive, we have this lingering suspense because we know he's going to be alone for however long. Then after that, once Mark has made some progress, for example with the potatoes and stuff, and we get another wide shot, exactly the same type, we feel almost like achievement and happiness for Mark. It's just interesting that these pretty much exactly the same type of shots create such different emotions because of the way they're edited and where they're put in film and what's behind them, like wind sound effects or a lack of any sort of audio or certain music tracks behind them, which really does highlight how much editing is needed to bring across certain feelings in a film, because those are the exact same type of wide shots and you get a different feeling each time. From everything I've said already, I think it's pretty clear how great of an example The Martian is for visual narrative, for how editing can move a story forward and make you feel something from a film. because they just did so, they went above and beyond with the editing. You know, another great example is how on Mars everything seems a little bit more fast-paced for the most part, and on Earth things are a little bit more slow-paced because one's a battle for survival and one is more, you know, kind of analytical thinking, or ooh, are we even gonna help this guy? Things speed up on Earth once they start helping him, but before that it's pretty slow paced on Earth, you know, just kind of doing a bit of like thinking and collaborating and all these meetings and stuff. And on Mars it's just a complete, always a battle for survival, and that makes it feel a lot more fast paced most of the time. You have your downtime moments in Mars, but most of the time it's a lot more fast paced, and I really like that choice. It makes it feel so just different from other films, and it's really, really, really cool. And once again, something that would only end up happening in the editing suite, because ultimately you choose how long to linger on a shot, you choose when to cut. You know, that's the beauty of it. No film is created until it is edited. You can film everything, you can have like the perfect acting, but until it's edited, until the shots are put in a good sequence, like they can even be put in the wrong sequence technically, but create a better story from it, like creating suspense by putting something later rather than first. Overall, when I watched this film, and from what you can tell from what I told you, I got so much emotion from the way they edited this. In terms of, this film could have been way less emotionally resonant if it wasn't edited in the way it was, if it didn't have those scenes of Mark kind of building up to being like, yes, I'm gonna do this, and then the movie just going straight into him doing it while talking about what he's gonna do, and then also having moments of him doing what he's doing, and then it almost narrating his mind's thoughts of like becoming a space pirate or something and showing his more human side. It's little moments like that, like him talking about being a space pirate, that makes you really care for him when he's going up in the rocket to meet with the Hermes again to go back to Earth, and he starts crying as he's lifting up in the rocket to go to outer space. It's those kind of moments that make that resonant, that make that crying scene in his suit resonant. You know, without all the extra character stuff earlier that the editing allowed, or rather the collaboration between the editor, the cinematographer, and the director allowed, then him crying, no matter how good the performance was, him crying in his ship as he's going up would effectively probably not do much to you, because you wouldn't care. But when we have those moments of him working hard but thinking in his mind, and us hearing him thinking about being a space pirate and stuff like that, it just creates such an amazing emotional hit when we see him in those scenarios where he can only be fully serious, where he's brought to tears by the gravity of the situation he's in.
I've been thinking about laws on Mars. There's an international treaty saying no country can lay claim to anything that's not on Earth. And by another treaty, if you're not in any country's territory, maritime law applies. So Mars is international waters. I'm about to leave for the Schiaparelli crater, where I'm going to commandeer the Ares 4 lander. Nobody explicitly gave me permission to do this, and they can't until I'm on board the Ares 4. So that means I'm going to be taking a craft over in international waters without permission, which by definition makes me a pirate. Mark Watney, space pirate.
I'm good. I'm anxious to get up to you. Thanks for coming back for me.
Capcom. Go. Remote command.
Go.
Recovery.
Go.
Secondary recovery.
Go.
Pilot.
Go.
So, The Martian, a film that basically does everything right, especially editing wise, from the time lapses that make it feel almost real world, to the montages with the present kind of narration and the future of him actually doing it at the same time. The Martian does everything right, especially from a visual narrative editing perspective. And that brings the video to an end. I hope you learned something not only about The Martian, but also about visual narrative and how editing is just so paramount for creating continuity, for creating emotional, you know, gravitas, for creating suspense, for doing all that stuff. It's not just the shot that the cinematographer took, it's the editor choosing when to use that shot, you know, how long to linger on it, you know, also the editor fighting with the director and the cinematographer saying, no, we need to change this so it feels more like that, because editors obviously edit by feel. That's all I have to say. This has been Hobbs, and I'll see you in the next video. Oh my gosh, how long was I filming for? A long ass